Hello, Haley.
Hey,
How are you?
Good, man. How you doing today?
Good. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Sex ed. So, I have to start by asking about your own sex ed experiences. Did you have sex ed in school yourself?
Yes, I grew up in California, which is one of the few states that actually requires medically accurate sex ed. So we got the early version in 5th and 6th grade for the boys and girls, and then when I was in 7th and 8th grade, we had Planned Parenthood come back and do the full thing. So yeah, we had comprehensive sex education when I grew up.
And do you have any horror stories or particularly memorable moments from that experience?
Well, we had the thing on the poster with me with the banana and the condom and everything, which I think is probably one of the most enduring images that people retain from sex education. And yeah, I mean, it's by nature an awkward thing to do, you know, and I remember particularly when you're in 7th and 8th grade, you know, and everybody's like, oh, I know everything I need to know, and, you know, you think you're all grown up and everything, and what we explore in this movie is that despite that, it's important to have, you know, accurate information and everything, and we have a lot of fun with the misconceptions that are still with certain people who think that, you know, they're very sexually experienced and all this stuff, and that, you know, with Planned Parenthood and all the research and everything, we make sure we get the facts right and everything. So we're pushing through the awkwardness to get to that.
So how did the movie enter your life?
This is a film that was the product of a meeting between Isaac Feeder, our director, and Bill Kennedy, our writer. Bill's other job is writing for House of Cards, so he has a pretty amazing range there. But they both grew up in Chicago and had, I believe, a mutual friend who went and taught English in Korea a while back, and sort of there are a lot of parallels with that character and my own character, who is really earnest about his job and is really trying, but is insecure in other ways and not so sexually experienced and is sort of a fish out of water. And then in 2010, I first read the script when it was set in Chicago, and then we were just searching for money, as happens a lot today with independent films, and we finally, in 2013, got an offer to shoot it in Florida on the condition that we had to shoot it there and not in LA. And it ended up being a real blessing in disguise, because had it been shot in LA or even Chicago, I think it would have been retreading visually certain ground that's been done before in comedies. And other than Magic Mike, I'm not really aware of other films that showcase Tampa and make Tampa. Everybody loves to make, you know, New York is a character in my movie and everything. We had Tampa be a character in our movie, and it ended up being a perfect, sort of appropriate setting for what goes on in there, and added a lot of color and flavor to the way the movie looks.
Thanks to a movie about strippers and middle school sexual education, Tampa is now a destination for movies.
Yes.
Did you... Okay, so there's a scene in the movie where... All right, so you're teaching junior high students, and there's a scene where you show them a series of images of the results of STDs. You catch an STD, this is what it's going to look like, which is jarring for an adult, much more a 12-year-old or whatever age they were.
Yeah.
Talk to me about filming that scene with the kids in the room.
Well, I can assure you that for that and for basically all of the scenes when I'm talking about anything explicitly, the kids were not even there. I'm showing it to an empty classroom. So yeah, when getting involved with a movie like this, I think everybody wanted to make sure we did it right and ethically and everything. And it's a credit to our producers and the director, and the casting directors on this film, who found all these great kids who were terrific in the movie, that their parents not only knew what the kids would be doing or not doing in the film, but also had read the whole script, so they were all okay with their kids being involved with the entirety of the movie and not just being slotted in there. So that made us feel really good. And then, yeah, the fact that I was surprised that showing the slides was part of the deal, but I remember that we did get that when I was like 12, 13. They did have those terrifying photos. But in this case, we were not exposing children to any of that information in reality.
You did make them, there's a scene where you have them draw questions out of a box, and they're very explicit. That's the scene in the trailer where the kids, like, can you use a van instead of a bus or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Anyway, you had them, or the director had them read, explicit questions aloud. What was filming that like with them? Were they oohing and aahing at getting to say these things on camera?
They were all about that age that I remember when you're in 7th and 8th grade and you're like, oh, I know all about this and stuff like that. So it wasn't traumatizing, I think, at all for those kids. What was really interesting for me is that, I know that the sex ed as a political issue can be sort of a controversial thing, and going into the several screenings that we've had over the past couple weeks in really diverse locations. We were in Palm Springs a couple days ago. We did sort of a more industry screening at SAG in LA. We did one for students at UCLA. And in each case, you prepare for people who are just, I guess, opposed to sex ed. And really, I've been pleasantly surprised at how supportive people have been and how many people that I've talked to after screenings are educators themselves. And one woman in Palm Springs told me, she was like, the scene with the questions, that happened to me, and I did it in my class, and the district came in and said, don't do that because who knows what they'll ask. And I think what we present in the movie is that the fact that these are questions that kids have is significant, and kind of shutting our eyes and hoping that the moment passes, at least in terms of public policy, is not really a sensible direction. So that's sort of where we land in the movie.
Yeah, did you guys spend time looking at kind of sex ed in various parts of the country and the way it does play out? There's a Obvious Child earlier this year kind of did a similar thing with abortion, a topic that is very divisive.
Radioactive, you might say.
Yes,
yeah.
Radioactive, absolutely, a better word for it. Did you yourself spend time considering what the state of sex ed in the country right now is?
I mean, I have my own beliefs with it. And what's also important is that primarily this is a coming-of-age comedy, so it's not at all a polemic. And Eddie makes, in his crusade to bring sex ed to these kids that he believes are being undereducated and sort of left in the cold while they're going through puberty, he makes mistakes. And the most significant one is not checking with parents. And so it's sort of finding a middle ground between, making sure you're not stepping on anybody's toes or doing things that parents don't want. But since we don't live in a perfect world where all kids have, parents that will teach them that when at the right age, the information should at least be available when possible. So, yeah, I mean, when you look at the map of this country about where medically accurate sex education is required, where it is completely disallowed, I mean, it's an interesting patchwork. And just as a matter of my personal opinion, the statistics have always backed up the fact that when you have comprehensive sex education and access to contraceptives and things like that, all the consequences we're afraid of with teen pregnancy and STDs and even sex at all is reduced when you give kids information and support. So I think starting there, prevents even having to get to difficult decisions later in life that are even more politically hazardous, I'd say.
And despite that heavy moment that we just got out of that, this is a comedy.
Yes.
And much of what you are doing right now in your career seems drifting toward the comedic realm, Alpha House, the Entourage movie, so on and so forth. Is that kind of where you are right now, or is this just how it's shaping up?
This was just a really amazing and fortunate coincidence because, I've been involved with this film since 2010, and it just got made by chance in the middle of getting the opportunity to do The Spoils of Babylon for IFC, and then Entourage, which is coming up in the spring. And I think it's just a result of it being a really incredibly fertile and creative time for comedy across the board. I'm also on an Amazon series, Alpha House. The second season just premiered over the weekend. And a lot of these shows, and I think Spoils of Babylon is a perfect example of a really odd concept that may not have found a home 10 years ago and now can find a place to be made and can attract those sort of names and everything. So I just, it's really fun doing comedy, but it just sort of happened as a result of it just being a rich time for that sort of thing.
One of the things about sex ed that I love the most is that Retta is in it.
Yeah.
Retta from Parks and Rec, who is just wonderful. Anytime she's anywhere, it just makes, I think, anybody who knows anything about her work so happy. What is she like?
Fantastic. She is a friend of the director, Isaac Feeder, and his wife. They go way back, so we were really lucky to have her in the film. Yeah, I mean, she's just perfect for that character, really fun to work with, really funny. I just cannot believe that. I run out of breath saying the cast sometimes. You remember from the last screen in the trailer, we got so many wonderful people who sort of are this revolving chorus of, in Eddie's life, giving him good advice and sometimes bad advice. And the experience of shooting that with those people was just really, really rewarding.
And there is a scene where you play the oboe.
Yes.
Do you yourself play the oboe?
I rented one I found out like a month and a half before shooting that we were going to make the film. I immediately went out from like the children's learn to play oboe thing. I got a kit and
like
brought
a
that with me.
recorder, like the plastic.
No, it was a real oboe,
an
yeah, and which is difficult even to put together, let alone play. So I got a few notes out, but there is some help from the music editor with that because it's a difficult instrument to play.
And this isn't a spoiler or anything, but the end credits have you and Matt Walsh sitting around. Matt Walsh, who plays Mike on Veep.
Yeah.
Sitting around, basically just talking about sex. Not even sex ed in particular, just two bros chatting about sex.
Yeah.
It feels very ad-libbed. Was that a scripted scene, and was it intended for the end credits, or was it originally going to be a scene earlier in the movie?
That was the last thing we shot, and a real treat because I didn't even know they had planned to do that. But Matt Walsh's scenes in the movie were sort of the last things that we filmed. And then at the end, they were just we're eating sandwiches in that scene, and we had finished, and we're having we had a food truck come to celebrate with the crew and everything. And we were just eating sandwiches, and they're like, "Hey, why don't you guys go back in and just talk for 20 minutes?" And so it was completely improvised. Doing that with Matt Walsh is
you guys get a little explicit.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, but those two characters who are don't appear that similar on the surface, but are sort of coming from the same place of. Kind of marginalized in society, and that's sort of the funny irony that we play with in the movie is that Eddie has to present himself as someone who is an authority on matters of sex, but nobody really has everything completely figured out in their own life, and so that's we play a lot with them, and you could say that Matt Walsh's character could be sort of an alternate universe, older Eddie, and if some things went differently in his life.
So you are in the highest-grossing horror movie of all time.
That.
You are. The Sixth Sense, if anybody doesn't know what I'm referring to. Do you have a favorite scary movie, and what do you recommend we watch this Halloween?
In a not altogether bad way, horror movies were ruined for me when I was 10 because I was living on the set of one for many months and
were a horror movie.
Seeing Stan Winston's work up close and everything, so I can see through the prosthesis to the craftsmanship behind it in most movies, but. I'd say, being a big Kubrick fan, The Shining really is just a movie that I can watch a lot, and a movie that just gathers more and more. The older you get, the more experiences you have, the more that it sort of unlocks things in me, at least. And then in more bloody horror, I'd say Alien is a big favorite of mine. A lot of Hitchcock stuff, but it's weird because I've never been really frightened by those movies, and it's more that I appreciate them for the story and everything. But yeah, I'm a fan.
And it was also, just going on this nostalgia wave, the 20th anniversary of Forrest Gump this year.
Yeah.
That movie is on TV. There's probably fewer days of the calendar year that it isn't on TV than it is. Do you ever just put it on a Sunday afternoon like the rest of us do?
No. I have seen it. That one's a little bit different because I was so young when it came out. I wasn't going to the premiere or watching it and everything. But with practically everything that I've done, you see the movie, like with Sex Ed, I've seen Sex Ed like 10 times in the past 3 weeks, so when we're done with this, I'll probably not need to see it again for a while, and with all my films, it's like that. But with Forrest Gump, yeah, I mean, I saw it, I had seen it a lot when I was younger and everything, and I actually just, I was newly coerced into becoming a social media person, and so I Instagrammed a month ago, I think it's July was the 20th anniversary of its release. I had this sheet of yellow legal pad that Tom Hanks wrote out my lines on because he and Zemeckis changed the scene a little bit on the last day, and my parents saved it on the day, and then I've kept it for a while, and so I Instagrammed this thing, this little piece of movie history that I've had in a drawer for a while.
Do you see Tom Hanks around at all these days?
Occasionally, the industry is strange like that. Because when I was so young when I made that, I have strong memories of that, and he was wonderful to work with. But I was 4 years old, so it wasn't exactly like we were gonna go out to dinner when we got back to Los Angeles. But I've seen him occasionally from time to time. I was at his AFI Life Achievement thing. That was one of the last times I saw him. But I've been really lucky because it's an industry where you form really close relationships with people for 2 months, and then you go off to the next thing, and you don't see people for a while. And working with people like Knight and Steven Spielberg, who sends personal cards at the holidays to the people he's worked with every year. It's really impressive the lengths that a lot of the people I've worked with go to maintain that sort of sense of community, which is kind of nice.
Is that what those on the inn call him Knight? M. Night Shyamalan?
Yes.
Knight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So who was it, going back to something you said a few minutes ago, who did it take to coerce you into social media?
The experience of being on the Entourage film. Everybody involved in that is very savvy with, posting things on Instagram and Twitter and everything. And the fan base is it's exciting because people love that show. And when we were shooting, I started to refer to Doug Ellen, the creator and director, as the inverse of a paparazzo because famous people will not leave him alone. So the whole time that we're making this movie, he's getting texts throughout the day saying, put me in it, I want to do a cameo. So he has to sort through all of these,
Were you one of those people?
No, I'm actually playing a fictional character in it, which is a lot of fun. Me and Billy Bob Thornton are, I guess you would say, antagonists for Ari, and we have a whole plot line with him. And I play a sort of an unsavory character who's kind of a mess, which is really fun. But we had, I guess I can't really say who was in it, but there were a lot of really fun cameos, and a lot of them all on the same day. So it's a fun set to be on.
Yeah, that set must be just a running joke at all times. Everybody just in the brightest of spirits and having the jolliest of time.
Yeah, and when it comes to the cast, it was really cool to see. It was kind of like the show, that a bunch of old friends who got to go out and do this fun thing again together. So yeah, I really had a blast on that. Yeah.
Do you ever get tired of the Haley Joel Osment all grown up narrative that everybody seems to take with any child star?
Well, you can't blame people with that. And it's funny because it's not like the things that I made when I was younger are things that I want to get away from, or it's not like you're trying to break that image in people's minds, because I'm proud of those movies, and they're still important to me, and because of the experience I had with them. But I am enjoying how just it's a natural process of getting older. You get to play different roles, and so for the last year and a half, sex ed excluded, I've mostly been playing villains or kind of creepy guys on the margins of society. I'm doing this film right now called Sleepwalker with Anna O'Reilly and Richard Armitage, where I play kind of a stalker, creepy sort of evildoer. So that's not really a role that a lot of 12-year-olds can play. So it's kind of nice.
So what's something that you haven't yet done, or somebody that you haven't yet worked with, that's really on your radar right now?
That's what's so exciting about this industry is there's a lot of actors and directors that I hope to get the chance to work with. Off the top of my head, just because I was seeing that There Will Be Blood orchestral thing they did at United Palace Theater last month. I'd love to work with Paul Thomas Anderson, a huge fan of his films. With actors, there's a cool thing happening now where a lot of the folks I went to school with, I went to the experimental theater wing right over there across the street at NYU, and a lot of the people that I studied with are now popping up in shows, and we're getting the chance to work together. Matt Walsh is also in Veep, and my friend Sarah Sutherland, who I studied with, is Julia Louis-Dreyfus's daughter on that show. So it's just this cool thing of people that I studied for 4 or 5 years with, and now we're getting the chance to potentially work together creatively, professionally, which is something I look forward to.
Yeah. So. Audience questions.
Mike, if anybody has a question.
You actually got the chance to work with some child actors on this most recent set. Did any of them ask you for advice on how to continue their career? And if so, what did you say?
They actually didn't. It was a really cool group of kids in that they were awesome in the movie and super prepared, but were also just kids, who were messing around, playing around on set in between takes and everything. So no jaded, child actor stuff with them. And one thing though that was funny is that there's this scene where I don't know if any of you have seen it, but there's a scene where this girl gets her period for the first time and is really scared and doesn't know what's happening. And it's this really sort of emotional scene for her. And with kids, you don't know if they're going to be able to do that or to cry on set. And we were doing the master, which you're only going to use a little bit from before we get into close-up, which is going to take a while. And she comes in and nails it and is crying. And me and the director both had the same reaction of, that's so great, but stop, save it. Like, you have to delay it for later. So there was some technical advice to give, but no, they really brought it. And I don't think the movie would have succeeded had they not been up to that level. So, yeah. I guess you're supposed to point at me.
Go for it.
Hi. Did you have a particular favorite scene that just kind of spoke to you as your favorite from this film?
Oh, God. You know, there's a scene early on in the film where, it's not giving too much away, where I keep walking in on my roommate he's in increasingly elaborate sort of like sexual like situations with his girlfriend. And we actually have I guess I'll blow this out in the open, but The Graduate was a big influence for us on this movie. There's a lot of, raunchiness and sex comedy in it, but at heart it's a film about, coming of age and finding yourself and everything. So we were watching The Graduate a lot, and we sneak in a little reference where I pop in the door, this thing with her leg, with Dustin Hoffman kind of framed in her leg, except it's something else. And Glenn Powell, who's terrific and plays my roommate and best friend in the movie, has to slip in this one shot, completely do a slip pratfall, bounce, and then like slide up to me, right there and deliver this line. And this was a 20-day shoot, so we rarely had more than a few chances to do things. And this was one of our, it had to be perfect timing. And we didn't get it the first time, the second time, and we were about to go into meal overtime. We had to quit it. And he was like, I know I can do it. And just does this just beautiful Buster Keaton style sort of slide up to me in this pool of lube. So that's just a really fun memory for me because there's times in a movie where you like hit a home run like that and you're like, okay, we're going to be good. Like the magic is kind of flowing and we just have to sort of stay alive with that. So, yeah. Pretty comprehensive.
Any more. Sixth Sense, Pay It Forward, Forrest Gump. Like, between those three movies, there's so many questions to be asked, right? There we go.
Hey, so you've done both TV and movies. Is there any difference between filming a TV show and a movie? What do you like better? What are the negatives?
It's, I wonder if we'll get to a time, in the near future where, I'm on what we would call a television show, but it's on Amazon Prime and, isn't relegated to your television. Like, as everybody knows, it's all sort of being turned into the same thing. So the film industry has contracted a bit, and so there's less movies being made today, but as everybody knows, a lot of that has pushed a lot of creativity and innovation into what we would still call television, I guess. So, 5 or 10 years ago, I would probably say that I wouldn't consider doing television because it used to be a lot more that this, it was a contract that bound you to that and you couldn't really work on other things. But it's kind of cool now that, you can do a television show to give some structure to your year and to have some routine and everything, and then sort of frees you up for the rest of the year to do movies. So I guess I like a healthy balance, with the routine and sort of reliability of television with things like Sex Ed, which was just a crazy guerrilla month, in Tampa. So best of both worlds.
I had a question because, you did a lot of really powerful movies early on in your life, in your career, Sixth Sense, Forrest Gump, and Pay It Forward. And then oftentimes artists, they peak, and then it's hard to keep going because it's like, wow, I did all this great work. It's like, how could I ever do that? Like the guy who did that Walk on a Wire, he did that one thing, and then after that, it's like his whole life was a mess because he could never reach that height anymore. So how do you keep going and reinventing yourself and doing things that keeps you on your edge, so that as an artist and also as a performer, so that you don't get sort of depressed or something about, wow, like, but that was so amazing, and I was a kid, and now I'm an adult, and I can't even do that, or whatever. I'm not saying that you can't, but it's like, it's easy to compare yourself, you know, like the whole thing with Michael Jackson and how it happened for him. So how does that work for you, and how do you keep yourself moving forward?
I guess the challenge is, there's two parts of a challenge that you'd face, you know, getting lucky like I did and having early success. And one is your craft and, you know, how well you're able to do your job, and the other is sort of more the perception and the business side of it. And I think I was really fortunate to work with a lot of directors and to have early guidance from my father, who was trained in the theater and was a theater actor. And throughout all of the, you know, those crazy high-profile movies that I got to do at a young age, the focus was always on improving my ability to do my job and to branch out and diversify. And even when I was younger, we were looking for scripts that would be different from each other, you know, and not just be playing, you know, similar roles, even when I was 11 or 12. So I never really had the expectation that you could count on, you know, blockbusters like that. Those are things that you just get. It's an unpredictable business, and you get really lucky with. So I think, to answer your question, my focus is just always: am I diversifying enough? Am I, you know, pushing forward with my craft? And part of that was going to NYU and not making movies for a couple of years and sort of learning a completely, you know, other set of techniques, and did some writing and directing there and everything. So it's just, I guess, moving forward and not just looking for recognition, I guess, is the best way, I think, for me to stay ahead of that.
We have time for one more question.
Hello. I'm just curious, as a consumer of TV and movies, what are you watching right now? Is there anything you're really excited about or inspired about?
Yeah, it's a great time for that, you know. And now with streaming, you know, you can go, wow, like I'm keeping up with like 15 shows right now, which is kind of crazy. Probably need to cut down. But love Veep. Was a big Breaking Bad fan until that ended. Game of Thrones. Without giving anything away, when the Red Wedding happened, I had not read Game of Thrones and knew nothing about it. And nowadays, I was seeing so many articles about it on the internet, I was like, you know, just in case I love this show, I might as well catch up now so I won't regret having it spoiled for me. So I did make it up to there and got to, you know, experience that without spoilers and everything. But Always Sunny in Philadelphia, love that show. I'm sure I'm missing a lot, but yeah, I'm definitely a consumer as well.
Okay, so I'll close it with, so now that Tampa is the new Hollywood,
yes, yeah.
When
you
we visit Tampa, what's fun to do? What should we check out?
The Riverwalk, which is we really squeezed as many scenic things out of Tampa as we could, and we have this sort of romantic Riverwalk in downtown Tampa next to the art museum there, which is a great museum. The Hub bar where we shot a lot of the movie is a couple blocks away from there, is really good. One thing that is a recurring joke in our film is that Tampa is, I believe, per capita, the strip club leader in the Western Hemisphere, since, you know, which I think is because it was a naval base going back decades, and that usually follows. But we talk about a strip club there called 2001: A Space Odyssey that has a UFO that I believe rotates stuck into the side of the building. So I forget what road that is, but if you want to cruise by there, you'll see where Matt Walsh's character spends a lot of his time.
Haley, thank you so much for being
Thank you
here.
very
It was
much.
wonderful.
Thank you, guys.